Well, hey, thank you all for joining us at the opening keynote for the DevOps Enterprise Summit. No, this is not that? Oh, darn. Dibby, you did the opening keynote. Dibby, good job, Dibby, thank you. Hey, thank you all for joining. It's going to be a fun, we have an hour. It's not going to be all presentation, it'll be some interaction, okay, some dialogue. But I'm joined by Rachel, okay, who's our distinguished engineer and CTO for the Bluemix Garage. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. We're a little punchy today. And as well as Kristal, who comes from PointSource, one of our partners. And the three of us are going to tell a story, okay? You know, it's amazing. You know, we can sit here and preach to you all. I think, you know, in this area of DevOps, what really matters are facts and how things are done. And I find that the best way to communicate learnings, to communicate what we do at IBM, what we do with our clients, what I think hopefully will inspire you all to do with your clients, is to tell you a story. So we have 3 stories we'd like to tell you. And in that story, we're going to be really specific about 3 things. 1, a method that we kind of had to create out of necessity, frankly, to transform how we do development, okay? The second that you'll see in these stories is physically how we did it, and examples of best practices, of metrics, of tools, and then third, outcomes. Outcomes from ourselves, when we transform ourselves, outcomes with our clients and our partners. Is that okay with you all? We can change the topic. I mean, this is not the keynote, so we can do whatever we want. We're going rogue. Is that all right? Will, you okay? You look very serious up there. Thank you for...
I'm awake.
You're awake?
I went to Disney and that was...
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, very good.
You saw it. Yeah.
Very good, yeah. Very good. All right. So our first story, and by the way, we encourage audience participation, if you like. But anyway, our first story that we're going to tell is our transformation of how we do development in IBM. It's been an amazing journey. You know, we've been in the company kind of changing and redefining the middleware category. You know, we sell software, hardware, services, right? But we've been changing this category of how middleware is delivered to clients, how folks get value from technology. And obviously, cloud kind of accelerated all of this. So as a result, we kind of reorganized ourselves. We brought certain pieces of things, synergy together, et cetera. So you have all these great teams doing things, but now they're working together. But they all work differently, right? They all had different processes, different metrics, different notions of what DevOps were. And we were doing quite good, moving really fast, but we knew that we had to move faster. We knew that if we did not change how we write code, how we participate as human beings in this process that is development, that we would be disrupted. So it kind of started to boil down into a 3-phase kind of approach. You know, we were always obsessed with thinking about this notion of design. I don't know if you all have heard of one of our products called Bluemix, which is our platform as a service, which is a beautiful way of getting access to open source technology, to building applications rapidly, public on the cloud or local. That was built through these notions of design thinking, something that we started to institutionalize across our portfolio. But then, you know, the notion of continuous integration, continuous delivery changed all of that, because good design, whether it's human-facing or API-facing, because, by the way, APIs like to date, okay, and actually talk to each other and match. All right, we've got actually API dating. We have API dating tools that allow you to match APIs on the internet. It's pretty amazing. But cloud changed all that too. We had to it's not just good enough to have good UIs or good APIs or good documentation or good fit for purpose. You had to kind of push things out into production. So what it boiled down to was changing how you code, how you community, and how you culture. And literally, we have transformed thousands of developers into 100+ or so squads. Squads are groups of between 6 and 8 developers. Those squads have a certain amount of autonomy in terms of what they do, how they do it, how they deliver it. We like to keep those squads geographically located, but you know, the world isn't San Francisco. Sorry, brother.
Or RTP.
Or RTP. You're from RTP? All right. The world's ain't Dandy Barbecue. Or Bojangles. I spent 3 years in the containment area. That's where I belong, in Cary. That's where they put me. Sorry for those of you who don't know RTP, but that's where they put folks from New York, in Cary. But we had, literally hundreds of squads, and we figured out how to make those squads be effective locally and remotely. We all talk about pair programming, how important that is. How do you do pair programming across geographies, right? It's not that easy. How do you get system knowledge? You want your developers to kind of not just spend the entire day in one security subcomponent. You want them to actually branch out and get system-wide knowledge. That's good for them as professionals, and it's good for us, because there's no single point of failure. You don't want a single point of failure, right, in your code. How many times in the old days you've had code that you want to ship to production, but Joey's on vacation? And he's the only one who knows how to fix it, and he's on the Disney cruise. What do you do, right? Boot camps, the way we did it, how we actually went out there and changed the way we do. And then a tool chain. The tool chain is the holy grail of metrics. Metrics is great. People sometimes are afraid at measuring. For those of us who live in the open source world, know that metrics are a beautiful way of understanding developer productivity, but also understanding the realities of when you can deliver things, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And most importantly is retention and morale. I mean, when you look at the folks at IBM who are building this stuff, these are pictures of some of the team members, right? Whether it's folks who love hanging out and Slack. Anyone use Slack? Yeah, a bunch of us use Slack. This is basically how we communicate now, is using Slack. And by the way, it's not all work. I got my Fantasy League football channel. We have a channel called Belt Popcorn. If you want to know what Belt Popcorn is, we'll tell you that later. But it's just a great way of interacting. How we do our scrums or Kanbans or retrospectives, all of that. And then, of course, the sheer productivity we have. We literally build our cloud platform. Our data centers, we've got 40 data centers across the world. Our infrastructure lives on top of that. We push out into deployment foundational services 4,000 times a day into pre-production, sometimes even production, okay? Changes. And those are elements that impact, everything on top of it, our platform layer and our SaaS offerings. That's the level of speed that we're getting, but also level of empowerment, because these folks feel empowered, right? Not, as I said, not every place is Silicon Valley, not every place is Austin, not every place is RTP, a hotbed of technology. You got folks everywhere in the world. You want them to feel empowered. A lot of this also came, if you kind of think about how we came up with this stuff and our practices, and by the way, it's constantly evolving, and we'll get into it, through our involvement in open source. Everybody familiar with open source, I hope? Yes. Yeah, that's an area that's very, that's nice. I know, I like doing that. I'm sorry. That's an area that's very kind of close to my heart, because I've spent quite a bit of time in those worlds. If you look at the centers of gravity around open source today, things like OpenStack. Everyone familiar with OpenStack? By the way, we had an OpenStack conference here in this same hotel, and it was literally like I don't know, 300 people only. Now you go to Vancouver, 7,000 people show up, Dave, to the OpenStack conference. It's bananas. Well, at IBM, we set up the CI/CD process for that. We set up the process for builds for OpenStack. A lot of what we do in our method is kind of what we do in the open communities. We've got 400 developers in IBM who spend 100% of their time upstream in the open source communities. You have meritocracies around squads, right? You do pull requests. If I've got someone who's building an application higher up the stack and needs something lower, they don't have to go through 10 lines of management. Sorry, managers, if there's any managers out there. We don't need you, right? They can change the code, write the test cases, put the pull request in. If it's good, it gets accepted, and you move on. That is the world that we live in, and that's how we're doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the building blocks of this method, okay? And I'm not really into video games that much. My gaming community only has about 3,000 people that I run, so it's not one of the bigger ones. But if you were to play games, and there was a new Minecraft story game that came out, so I decided since we're telling stories, we'll do that. I'd like to talk about some of the building blocks behind this method. You can go there now and check it out. Okay, this does not mean pick up your phones and go there, but I guess it does because I just said that. And the actual website is ibm.com/DevOps method. All right, go there. okay? And you can get a ton of detail behind each of these. We actually documented how we go about doing all of these. The first one is thinking. This borrows from the notions of design thinking, how you kind of bring forward the idea of understanding what you're trying to build, exploring, prototyping, evaluating, failing. Okay, failing is okay. Failing, I'm not a big fan of failing myself, but it is a huge important part of this. I like to pivot. You fail, but then you pivot, because if you fail and you don't pivot, you're not learning anything. Right? Failing is part of the learning process, right? So we get into very specifics about how you start to do the design thinking portion of this. By the way, all these slides are on SlideShare. So if you all follow us on Twitter, right, you can get them. There's a link on the SlideShare, so you don't have to take pictures, but you can if you like. And the second, that I'll go through is culture. Because, you know, without culture, none of this works. It is incredibly important that the developers have the right space, the right executive sponsorship, that they feel empowered, and that you ignite innovation. They will do things that will leave you fundamentally confused. I mean, you know, everybody knows what cascading style sheets are, CSS, just to give you an example. It's one of the specs that I co-authored back, it's my first year in IBM, but I open up the source for web pages and I look at how developers use CSS and it leaves me confused, right? But that's what you want. That's the kind of innovation you want. And you have to kind of have that culture where folks feel like it's coming home, right? Like work is an extension of home. Computer scientists are artists. That's who we are, right? We are a different type of artist. And so the notion of culture and how you establish the right culture with the, you know, we all know there are pressures. You know, I'm not living in a fantasy land, right? There are pressures in terms of headcount and resources and this and that. Yeah, I understand. You can still do it. You can still have the right culture in those pressures. Then we're going to talk about learning. Learning is a continuous process. And, you know, the metrics part and the tool chain is critical for the learning side. If you don't have a standardized tool chain, it's very hard to compare apples with apples versus apples to oranges. And I know this might sound, you know, pedantic to some of you, but let me tell you, a lot of the clients that I talk to don't have that. Right? They don't have a common way of looking at a Git and at the level of developer understanding their productivity on an hourly basis, on a daily basis. When do they work more? When do they? All those things matter, right? They absolutely matter. All right, and you could have all rolled up dashboards. And by the way, what I'm doing is not some secret, you know, corporate thing. We do it in open source. Go to OpenStack. You can see Dave's productivity. Well, not anymore, but you know, because you're no longer productive. I'm sorry. You can see people's productivity in the communities. Okay, so it's not like we're doing some spooky stuff that developers aren't familiar with. So we talk about how we actually do that, and of course, code. Code absolutely matters. And here's something. There's two really important concepts around code. The first one is, you know, we also talk about measure multiple times and cut once, right? Which is true if you're putting molding in your house, right? And I was, over the weekend, I was doing some kitchen work and I screwed up and I go, multiple trips to Home Depot because I kept on getting the angle wrong. It's like, oh, darn. In development, it's okay, right? You can actually, don't even measure, just cut and you keep on going, right? But what's interesting is that the whole cloud notion and the whole way, this whole method is actually impacting how we build applications. Think about this for a moment. DevOps and this method that we're talking about is changing the nature of the architecture of our applications themselves, not the other way around. So yes, it is a way of accelerating application delivery, but it also changes how you build your app and fundamentally the pieces and the types of services and microservices that you build, okay? And then of course, going from the code to production, and this is critical. This notion of making a change, putting it into pre-production. We're not insane. We're not going to push it all the way out all the time. We do, but we push it out, you know, at intervals, right? Going out into and having a delivery pipeline is really, really important. And then, of course, the work that we do around running the application and managing the running features of the applications. That feeds into the process as well. understanding where performance is occurring or not occurring, right? Understanding how you change the code based on those realities. You know, for those of us who've been around the service-oriented architecture days, you know, I actually think that those days were amazing because, you know, we applied object-oriented programming to the network, right? And it was beautiful because whenever you have a democratization of technology, it's no longer spooky PhD stuff, right? You get levels of innovation you can't believe. So in all of our systems, big and small, we expose business function. But what did we forget? We forgot about running and operating. It's not all about code, right? So the running part, well, you know, we learn as an industry, are we always evolving, right? And, you know, this method and the things that you'll hear about, it talks specifically about code. And then of course, managing it. And everything from your chaos testing, you know, putting your creepy crawlers out there to try to kill your systems, all that kind of stuff. We talk specifically about how we do it and how folks, you know, what open source we use to go do that, how you all can go and do that as well. And this notion of you know, just kind of trying to break things or test things or manage things, you know, a couple times a day are gone. We are constantly doing these types of testing, you know, resiliency testing, et cetera, right? Because that is the world that we live in now. There is no, you can't hide, right? You cannot hide from your boss when something goes down, right? It's just how it is. So it changes how you build. So that is the method. It's about thinking, coding, delivering, running, managing, and learning, okay? All centered around a very, very strong culture. So how do we operationalize it? Because scaling what you do, you know, in a small environment with 20 folks to a large enterprise is non-trivial. There's lots and lots of difficult politics within organizations, within teams, across teams. But I can tell you that all of that can be handled. Jay Cherie is handling it. She runs our development transformation. Thank you.
I used to be 6 feet.
It used to be 6 feet tall? Is that the trick? You just shrink? Okay, right? And a really important part of this was executive sponsorship. Now, I'm not saying you got to have, you know, person up top say, this must happen, and all action occurs from the top. Because in fact, a lot of the action occurs from the grassroots. It's the developers. They want it. But what we are saying is that you have to have the right partners who actually will find a project, something that matters, right? And one that's perhaps not too complex, where you can be successful, all right? And then take those successes and repeat them. And that comes with executive sponsorship, right? You can't do everything, right? So it's this combination. And then of course you create a center of gravity, a center of interest, a center of practice around these methods, okay? We've got a team here. I don't know if Carolyn is around there. She's got about, I don't know, 45. I'm giving you numbers so you understand the scale of how we're doing this. About 45 people who work for her, who work and embed themselves with the development teams. They're coaches. And we literally sit down and say, okay, here's your roster of developers. Let's break them into squads. Here, names of human beings, putting them in squads, talking about their personalities, talking about the mixes and matching. This is not trivial, right? Getting people to work together effectively. All that process of how we did it is here. And that's what you do when you do these things at scale, okay? And then of course we run the boot camps. Boot camps for managers, boot camps for executives, and most importantly, boot camps for developers. To on-ramp them and stay with them. Embedding the coaches as you go through this, you stay with them. So what I'd like to do now is transition to Rachel, who will talk to us about this in practice with clients here in San Francisco. I think it's the new Star Wars trailer.
Here we go.
Businesses realized that they need the right skills, the right approach, and tools in order to build quickly and efficiently the apps they need to go to market.
When we looked at what was happening in the industry and happening with our clients, we saw a need to change how development is done.
In steps the Bluemix Garage.
The garage brings
design thinking methods to help our customers build the right application on Bluemix.
And the question is, what should you build first? And how do you ensure that people really want to use it?
It's all about the user. The user is the reason we're building a product. We can build a product for a business need, but that doesn't mean someone's going to use it.
Our goal is to create an experience, to develop something that's really going to make their life better. I've seen a lot of projects go to market that don't meet that user's needs. Someone gets them and they're like, okay, this is cool, and I would never use it. That's the worst outcome. We never want that to happen, and our methodologies help avoid that.
It's about doing design and changing the way you think, adopting and learning from lean startup. We do hackathons, we do ideation workshops, in combination with a very disciplined, agile development approach on a platform that gives you that agility. And that's where Bluemix comes in.
Bluemix gives us the tools and services for us to build our application in a way such that we don't have to know or interact with infrastructure behind the scenes.
Bluemix provides this rich environment of core capabilities for development and then lots of additional exciting services for doing innovation. The garage was really built to address the high speed at which IT and business want to go.
It starts with this space we have here in the Galvanized community, which is this very open space and everyone's sitting side by side. We're encouraged to work together.
Everyone's involved and everyone's getting feedback, and it all goes to getting to that right app rapidly. Clients come to the garage because they're looking for a new way of doing application development. And we're here because it gives us an environment for innovation.
Skills are very important in our industry. It's always a challenge for any organization to be able to find the right people to help build software applications. And so being part of a talent pool in places like San Francisco, London, Toronto is important for us as well.
We are a consulting services organization where we look to educate, help, and mentor some of the startups and our enterprise clients, and we're really looking to disrupt.
In order to be disruptive, you need people who have different perspectives. Everyone here is coming from a really interesting, diverse background, and it's the combination of us that really makes what we do great.
It's bringing these elements together in a room that delivers the highest value proposition. So you hear that a core part of what we're talking about there, am I on? You guys hear me? Okay. Thanks for the thumbs up in the back. Is bringing people, bringing skills together. And we are the Bluemix Garage is a consultancy. We started about a year and a half ago here in San Francisco and have expanded. And we just announced, in addition to Toronto and London, Nice as well. Each of our garages is located in a startup community. The one here is right down the street. I just walk back and forth. And we work with clients to make them successful adopting Bluemix. And that means working with clients who are doing cloud enablement, moving some existing applications or modernizing them to the cloud, and with many clients working on innovation. And that's really the part I'm going to talk a little bit more about today, that we have an innovation methodology. We have a track through the method that we brought here. So we've taken what we've been doing in the garage, combined with what Angel's team has been leading within IBM, which is in turn based on a lot of what we've been doing with open source, and we bring that together and we bring that to the clients. So what I want to share with you is one of the tracks through the method. So the method consists of a set of practices, a set of experiences, a set of tool recommendations that work together. And what we do in this track is take you on a path, an adoption path, a very specific one around innovation and how you go about going from an idea to a fully scaled production application. So what we do in the garage is we work with clients. We can work with them on getting to the idea through hackathons, through ideation workshops, through crowdsourcing, ideation challenges. So we have a variety of ways. Often clients have a problem space or an opportunity or an application idea already in mind that they want to refine, they want to build, they want to validate that that there's a good business value to doing it. So we bring them in and we run a 2-day design thinking workshop. It's very interactive. Everyone's up on their feet, putting stickies up. We explore the personas. We explore empathy. We look at how things are done today, where there are existing pain points. We ideate around those pain points to come up with potential solutions. We look at the potential business value of these ideas as well as the feasibility, viability of that. Next, we look at what are the underlying hypotheses for the idea that you're looking at building, the solution you're going to build. There is a set of assumptions, and we apply this to ourselves. So last night, we're on the roof talking with Randy. Where's Randy? Anyway, our marketing lead, and part of the discussion is, so all right, we're doing this launch. What is success? What is the specific metric, the specific number that we hope to hit in terms of visits to the website, in terms of follow-up? And that's what it's about, is setting forth, this is what success is going to mean. We want to prove, in this case, that this method is of interest to people. And we're going to measure this as we go through. We believe that these are the elements which are important to people, the tracks, the practices, the tools. But we're going to measure every single thing because we've applied all these DevOps principles. We've applied this method to building the method site. So we have all this analytics data. So this is what we do with the clients. So how many people do you think are going to be interested in this app? How many people are going to use the feature? How many people are going to make a purchase as a result of it or engage in whatever way it is you want? So we have a very strong focus on getting to that. And having understood the hypotheses, what is the smallest thing that we can build? We view the method site that we have just launched as an MVP in itself. It's going to live, it's going to grow, it's going to change. We're going to see that there's some principle that nobody seems to care about. We're going to take it out, right? We're going to see there's something people are really interested in. We're going to add more. And we're also going to do it with the community. The same thing that we do with our clients. So coming out of the workshop, we have a set of hypotheses, we have a minimal viable product, we have a team who are aligned around what is going to get built, and then we go into design activity to design a great user experience. So in the garage, we have designers and developers. We also have architects who work on integration challenges. And then we move into iterations of development, test-driven development, pair programming, continuous integration, all the good kinds of things that you would expect with a set of tools on the cloud. From there, we go to deployment. So our projects are often, say, 6 weeks to 10 weeks to get to that minimal viable product. That is a pilot. It is a production level pilot that's ready to be deployed. We leverage Bluemix for all the great services. That's how we're able to do it in such a short period of time, combined with the DevOps practices and tools. And then we do those hypotheses. So now we're gathering the data that tells us whether our thinking is correct. So we do both end user testing to see if the experience is resonating and how it should be changed. And we look at the business metrics, the business tests that we want to run to validate it. Ideas coming from things like lean startup. And then we expand and we scale in 2 dimensions. We expand the functionality of the application. We can scale it on the cloud platforms that we have. And then we also scale, as Angel was talking about, in the adoption of the methodology by clients. So one example of having done this with a client is with Manulife. They were one of our very early clients at the garage. And it was sponsored, to the sponsorship point, it was sponsored with one of the vice presidents in Canada who was really looking for, how could I potentially accelerate innovation? How can I strengthen the relationship that I have with the business team? How can I start to engage into startup communities? And in fact, they started something called Red Labs, which places a couple of their people into a startup community. So, these kinds of concepts, they're experimenting. They're seeing what kinds of methods and practices work for them and how they can drive cultural change. So they came in with 3 objectives: delivering a pilot application, which we did, we worked on. Evaluating the garage, and this was very core. They sent they sent a product manager, a developer who paired in with us for 5 weeks, and also an enterprise architect, for the enterprise architect to really have the lens on it of how could this fit, how could this fit within the culture, and technically evaluate Bluemix. And this was very successful. It built a good relationship. They are further using Bluemix. We're working with them on a variety of different initiatives. Another example is an international bank that wanted to do something very different. So it's not a visual user experience particularly. It's really around a set of APIs, around loyalty points, and a business concept of exposing their loyalty points program for use with partners. And they really want to test out and validate this business idea that partners would engage in this way and looking for ways to bring new value to their customers. So we worked with them and we built this, and again, they sent people to the garage. They wanted us to push on some of the areas of their culture that was not so agile, like requiring 30 people and 15 reviews for 2 screens. So we kind of pushed on that with their sponsorship. Things like that. I mean, they wanted to learn, which we certainly did. We learned a lot through this. And we set a metric, which was that we wanted merchant developers to be able to get connected to these APIs in 4 hours. And when we ran a hackathon to test it, we were under 2 hours, so we did really well. All right, so with that, I think you're up.
I'm up.
Kristal. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm Kristal York, and I'm an executive mobile strategist, and IBM asked me to come and kind of talk about some of the things that we do. We are a mobile development company, and we focus on strategy, design, and development. And one of the things I heard on the video, which I don't think I heard before, was, we get one opportunity to get an app out in front of somebody, and if they don't like it and they delete it, there's only an 80% chance that they'll even download it again. So with my clients, the biggest conversation in my strategy conversations are how are we going to make these opportunities something that's meaningful. And the biggest part of that is through, intelligent design and continuous collaborative delivery via cloud. And so we're leveraging a lot of the things that Bluemix offers and a lot of the cloud-based tools that our clients can have in addition to some of their enterprise systems. As well as why strategy. One of the things that we've learned, and I'm going to just tell you 2 things we learned, and then I'll give you a bunch of client examples, but one of the things that we learned is this is kind of what our room looks like when we start a strategy session. Everybody comes in, they're so excited, they all want to do mobile, but when you get down to it, they all have different ideas, and they don't really have an alignment across the board of what they want to do and how they want to do it. So, and part of mobile strategy is so important because you have to know the space and know kind of what the disruptors are, know what people like Uber are doing and things like that, so that you can actually start kind of figuring out where you're going to go from here. The next big lesson we learned is that alignment is actually the key for agile innovation. So oftentimes we go in and we meet with a CMO and a CIO and they're not aligned. And we've learned that the secret of them actually being successful is actually kind of having that focus on that alignment between each other, and that it actually helps them drive this agile process and it helps us get an MVP to market faster if they are aligned. In CMO.com, just by chance this week, they actually had a, it's creaking here. They had an exclusive article where they talked about how often CMOs and CIOs see as like a one-size-fits-all. Like, so that's kind of the digital approach right now, and you can't be that way if you want to be disruptive, right? So if you don't want to be disrupted in your space right now and you want to be the disruptor, you need to actually think outside of a one-size-fits-all, and you really need to take in your customers' journeys and kind of your consumers into the account to actually be that disruptor in the space and not be disrupted by somebody like Uber. I'm going to talk to you. I'm first going to start off with this disruptor in this space. This is one of our clients. Has anybody heard of Security First Florida? Security First Insurance? Anybody from Florida? No Florida? Okay.
I like to go to Florida.
You like to go to Florida? If you have a house in Florida, it is warm and wet, yes. So this is the 3rd largest private held insurance company in the state of Florida. They came to us a couple years ago and said that they had a goal to actually become an innovator in the space, and they want to disrupt kind of the mobile insurance company, kind of industry there. They wanted to actually change their model to more of a supply chain management, where they're actually now the primary supplier for most major insurance companies for the state of Florida, for insuring homes in the state of Florida. It's a fascinating process, but they really wanted the biggest thing that they said is they had to target millennials, as millennials are starting to move to Florida, and they needed to change their whole entire look and feel of how they were doing business. So they came to us and they said, help us figure this out. And we said, okay, we'll try to figure it out. So the first thing we did was actually created an InstaQuote application, and it first started with renters and now it goes all the way through homeowners. But they actually made it, they were able, with us challenging them, they were able to actually reduce it down to a 3-minute process. So if you guys go on, anybody out there, you go to Esurance or any of those other big carriers, and you try to quote your home, it's normally a 26 to 36 step process, and it takes you about 5 to 10 minutes. But with their ability to actually do a lot of integrations and pay for some kind of data from different vendors, they were actually able to reduce it down to 3 minutes. So it's a very quick and easy process. That brought their conversion rate up 35%, which is huge in an insurance industry. The next thing they wanted us to do was overhaul their whole entire portal, and they didn't actually at that point have a mobile web or mobile payment option at all. So everybody was still sending in checks or calling and giving credit cards on the phone. And so we said, okay, let's allow you to do mobile payment. And they were like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if people are going to like that. And we're like, well, if you're going to get millennials, you have to offer mobile payment. You can't not do that. So they offered mobile payment, and now it's 140% increase in payments at conversion. So they were oftentimes having a gap between when they actually got the conversion and got the sign up to when they actually were getting paid. So it's 140% increase in that, which is crazy, right? So that's not it. Then they were like, we want to disrupt the space one more time. I said, okay, what are we going to do now? And they said, well, we love Florida. We know storm after storm and year after year, we have to be there when there's a crisis for our companies and for our clients or our customers. And they wanted to create an app that it's actually integrated with the National Weather Service. You can see it down there. It's probably not very big, so we probably should have made it bigger, sorry. But it's integrated with the National Weather Service. You guys can all download it if you have a home anywhere on the East Coast and you're interested in hurricanes. I used it when the last hurricane was coming up towards New York. It's a great little tool. You can plug in your address. It shows you the evacuation routes. It shows you storm centers. It shows you the path of the storm, so you have an idea of relevant to your home or your property where that storm is going to track. And so what they had said is they wanted to make sure that they were actually providing their customers above and beyond expectations as far as what they are providing for their customers and what they're able to do. And this is another sense of how you can do it and do it beyond your customers, right? Reach out to other people that are beyond just the state of Florida. My second example is a major supply distribution company in the US. And they came to us and they had kind of sketched out an idea of what they wanted to do for a mobile app, and it was an operational app for their truck loaders. So they have a bunch of people that stand on a truck dock, and they actually take all these boxes and they put them in pallets based on when they're going to deliver it, and then they pack it into a truck, and they have to document where they're packing it into a truck so that the person that's unloading the truck knows which pallets come off at each delivery station. And they were doing it all by paper. So the IT company came to us, their IT department came to us and said, hey, can you just take a look at this and help us? We can't figure it out. Every time we go talk to the loaders, they don't like it. So we pushed on them and said, okay, you have to let us go down and stand on the loading dock. And they're like, you don't want to do that. And I'm like, no, I have to go stand on the loading dock. I have to understand who these users are and what they're doing. So my UX guy and I went down and we stood on the loading dock for the day in 30-degree weather in big parkas and watched them actually load and pack these pallets. And it was really interesting. We started to understand that the things that were important to their management weren't the things that were important to those guys that were loading stuff. The critical elements of data that they needed were really things that we could quickly flash up on the screen and help them make better decisions at a faster rate. And so we kind of remodeled some of that. And then the next thing we noticed is these guys were wearing huge gloves. And I said, okay, well, what's up with the gloves? You know, you obviously need gloves, but how are you going to use a device with a set of gloves? And they're like, I don't know. They've given us 15 different types, and they all have these little nubby things. And every time I start packing boxes, it rips the nubby thing, and then I have a hole in my thumb. And now my thumb's cold. And I'm like, all right. So we had gone back, and I grabbed my nail polish, and I painted on the nail polish on the end of one of their gloves and said, hey, let's try it. Because I know it's, I do it on my own gloves at home. It works, right? Clear nail polish works. They could touch it. They were like, this could be really great. We'll try this, And then we also realized when you have big gloves, you need bigger touch elements, right? You can't have small touch spaces. You have to have bigger spaces for those big gloves to be able to touch. The next thing I did is we handed the guy a phone and I said, hey, take the phone. This is like I want to see kind of how you're going to hold it. And every single one of them, what we would normally do is hold the phone like this, right? You hand it to me and I'd hold it kind of like this and I'd start looking at it. So our design originally was in a portrait kind of way we kind of started mocking things up. They twisted it, and the first two guys that I talked to held it like this. And I'm going, this is weird. So we went to the third guy and I said, well, what kind of phone do you have? They're like, we have a flip phone here. Like, well, I don't need a phone. What's a flip phone? I'm like, okay. I said, why like this? It's a game controller, right? Right? So what actually we did is we had to flip our design for this company and actually divide the screen in two and allow them to use their thumbs to quickly and easily load those trucks and load those packages on top of, or load the information about the package that they were loading on the trucks. So sometimes you need to take the time to really understand your users, to understand a better design. And doing that, you actually come out with a much better product at the end of the day. And am I okay on time? Okay. The next one is Comdata. Comdata, is anybody familiar with Comdata? Anybody know what they are? They're a financial service company that actually provides payment innovation for fleets and multiple other people. 90% of your gift cards are actually backed by them. But every single truck, or not every single truck, but 90% of the trucks that you see going across the United States actually have their drivers have Comdata's cards that they swipe at the gas station. So they came to us and they said, we promised our supplier we're going to get a mobile app out in 2 months, and what we're doing isn't working. We're like, all right, 2 months, that's not really a lot of time. And they said, and the problem is that we need to give our drivers the location that they need to go to as quickly as possible. Because they're driving these big trucks, and now they need to find gas and they need to find it immediately. So we had to really think about kind of how we were going to approach this design to make sure that we weren't distracting them, because if we distracted them, it could be a critical or a very dangerous, disastrous event if we distracted them too much in their cab. And that we needed to make sure that we got the interface where they could actually get to that place the fastest. The interesting part of this story is that they actually had to combine 60 billion data points per month. So they were consuming credit card swipes at different gas stations to be able to tell what the prices were and they were getting 60 billion data points with 700,000 3D geolocation elements every single second. And so it was crossing over 97 countries. So we had to figure out how we were going to pull all that data together, distill it, so that you got that one right answer. Plus there was proprietary algorithms and all kinds of pricing for each fleet, because each fleet has, discounts with certain companies. And so one of the things that we learned on this process is that sometimes the more data isn't the better, especially when you need to get a user somewhere the fastest. So the best answer for this one is we actually just took them right there. We had one button in this first screen and it took them right to that cheapest spot. And the adoption rate has actually been hugely successful for them because of that reason. Because most of the fleet companies are actually okay with them using an application if it takes them there and it doesn't distract them from their drive or from their route. So it's taking that mobile moment and making sure you're giving it the fastest route to the answer, right? And we talked about that earlier, is making sure that you have an application that's really meaningful to your users and not just building something that's not meaningful. And my last example is Primerica. Primerica is a diversified billion-dollar financial service company. It's always a twist in my tongue. And they service a middle-income market for financial services in North America. They're based out of Atlanta. They have about 100,000 people in the sales force. They actually rent the Georgia Dome out every year, and they do a huge kind of rally there, which is actually fascinating. We got to go this last past year with them. They came to us a year and a half ago or a couple years ago and said, here is our problem. Our landscape of our agents are changing drastically. And we now have all these millennials, and they don't want the old papers, right? This trunk of papers that we used to have, we don't want them. They don't want them. They don't want to deal with papers. They want to be able to sign up quickly. They don't always have their laptops with them. They might just have an iPad or a device, like a mobile device, a mobile phone. How can we help them actually be better and more engaged and actually stay with us? Because the retention rate of the millennials was actually at a very high rate of them dropping off of being agents, because they were just tired of all the paper process and how long it took for them to actually get somebody signed up. So within 5 months, we applied a DevOps approach, and we enabled IBM public cloud as well as some of their enterprise proprietary data. So it was a pure hybrid approach because it has a combination of both. And we were able to develop this in 5 months to get from concept to launch. And we were able to, in this first release that we put out, they were able to increase by 35% their millennial engagement. And then they got 60% increase of new recruits from that 35% increase. So from that 35% increase, they got 60% new agent recruits that were millennials. And what we found from the studies is that they were 2 times more likely to attend classes on the app because they were on the app and they didn't have to go into their laptop, so they could watch them when they were at a coffee shop or something like that. They were 3 times more likely to get licensed because there's a licensing process that they have to go through for sales, and they were 4 times more likely to make a sale once they finish this whole process. So now we're actually delivering updates to this for the last 18 months. We've been delivering updates every 3 weeks. We've been listening to the millennials, and they have lots of feedback. They're great. If you guys have engagement with millennials in your processes, make sure you hear them because they have great insight, and they actually do a really great job of giving you feedback on how you should change your application. And then we've been able to push out new enhancements to them as well. So Angel's going to talk about kind of how you can do the next step and how you can actually apply some of this thinking to make your own success story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give an applause to Kristal. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Appreciate it. I love that story, and it was really neat is that you kind of mentioned something that is really important. It doesn't, the DevOps approach doesn't only change how you architect the code, it also fundamentally changes the business process itself, right? How you actually build the application. Sitting there at the truck and watch is a beautiful story, so thank you. All right, 3 things. To be successful, you need to have the right innovation method, we think. This method is not static. It changes, it grows, you adapt to it. There's different paths through it, like Rachel showed us, based on what you're trying to accomplish. We put all our stuff out there. You can all go look at it, take advantage of it, use it. And we announced yesterday that we're going to make the method open source. Now, what does that mean? Okay. Obviously, it's out there. You can use it now. There's no license around it. It's not code, right, or anything like that. But what that means is that we're going to create a community around it. Okay. Much like we do with many of our open source projects. There's going to be a community of folks who contribute to the method, who grow, who add paths through the case study, who looks at the tool chains, who adapts it, etc. So hopefully, what will happen is not only will we learn, but we will all learn together collectively as a community, building code, right? Which I think is hugely, hugely important. Also, the platform. The platform matters. You do not want to be, inhibited by a boat anchor, right? It's tough. It's tough to run in the mud, right, Dave? So Dave does these tough mudders. It's not pleasant, right? It was great about the video that you showed. One of the fellows there was talking about what we do in our platform is you don't have to worry about the infrastructure, right? You have access to your polyglot, different languages to build your polyglot applications, right? You can scale across geography. We've got, 40 data centers across the world. There's lots of reasons to tier your applications different ways. You can use containers, you can use Cloud Foundry, you can use the OpenStack. It's all kind of there for you, all managed for you, whether it's on-premise, off-premise, or dedicated. So whether it's our platform or anyone else's, the right platform matters because you don't want to spend the time doing these kinds of things. And I think we've learned that, but there's a constant evolution on this, right? This is just starting, right? What we've done in Bluemix obviously has just been hugely successful for us. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of users, but the state of the art around this new model, this service-oriented architecture applied with DevOps and microservices is just kind of beginning. And it's very, very exciting. And then, of course, the right culture, the right innovation culture. And I got to tell you, the fastest way to institutionalize this is spend a week with Rachel and the team. Just see it. Just come to the garage. Come to San Francisco. Come to London. Come to Toronto. Wherever. Hang out. They got great food. But hang out. Good snacks. Yeah, good snacks. I always gain weight. A couple pounds here, a couple pounds there, it all adds up. But it's a great opportunity just to immerse yourself, build a minimal viable product with them, take it back and say, wow, maybe I want to deploy this at scale. And we'll take the next step together. But the most important thing of all, out of anything we've all said, and I think in this conference has said to date, is do not forget to have fun while you're doing it, right? We spend a whole lot of time at work, right? And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it, all right? So with that, we'll close it. Any questions, we can answer them. We can answer it after, but thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Rachel and Kristal. All right. Yes?
Are there plans to move the garage to Seattle?
Are there plans to move the garage to Seattle? There is, not specifically. I don't know that I mentioned that we have a pop-up capability. So we have a set of consultants who do the same set of practices who are traveling consultants. So we can go, so what you said, go on-prem. So sort of.
Nordstrom. Do you come to Nordstrom with your guys?
Well, personally, I go to Nordstrom's all the time. So, you know. But
Can we get a friends and family discount?
great shoe department, right? But
Exactly.
but no. So what we do is yes. So we will come to clients. Our choice when we go into a community, we into a city, we can do a pop-up. So especially for the initial workshops, and ideally we actually do it into a startup community. So we're about to do that in Detroit. So we're going to go do a design thinking workshop there, so we can have a large group of people. We're going to do the development here in the garage, but we also, like, we have another one we're going to do for Japan. They're coming here. We're going to do a workshop here. We're going to go there and do the development work with their team. So, you know, we can mix and match it. I will say that Galvanize, the community that the garage is in here in San Francisco, is in Seattle. So we have a great partner there in terms of a space to do some of this innovation. And so I'd be delighted to pop up in Seattle, and especially for Nordstrom. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So one thing that I've been seeing in several sessions is a lot of discussion about the technologies. And I'm sure SoftLayer is a wonderful platform.
Sure.
I understand that Bluemix is terrific. But I'm also hearing every speaker say the same thing. It's not about the technology, it's about the change management. What I haven't heard anyone address, and I didn't hear you guys address it either, is how do you instantiate that change in a large legacy environment where people build careers, silos, advancement by doing traditional waterfall development. And I see a lot of environments where they set up a separate DevOps environment and say, okay, we're going to do this systems of engagement in DevOps, and the systems of record will be waterfall, but that just builds a bigger wall between the two. So I don't see any of the speakers, and maybe you guys have the secret sauce, talk about how to address the change management in a large-scale legacy organization that has built itself on traditional development. The tools, the coolness of developers, that's great, but I just haven't seen anyone address the change management issues.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'll say two things, and maybe Dave, you can get into this as well. Dave is our IBM fellow who actually runs the DevOps for the entire company. But you know, there's two approaches. You know, one is we talk about multiple speed IT, and this is what you're alluding to, right? And we kind of approach this two different ways. One is if you look at a legacy environment, let's say our Z systems. We run Linux on Z, right? All this open source, all this stuff runs on Z. You can actually do some of this on Z. Now, that doesn't solve the development processes. It doesn't solve exposing your APIs and how you move faster. But what you want to do is have consistency on how you build these things and move at the speed that makes sense for the platform, but do it in a consistent way. Don't have different practices, okay? Sometimes there are very good reasons for doing things the way we have done them, and that's okay. But you have to have these things work together. That's point number two. And the way we do that is by managing this multiple speed IT with a consistent framework. I don't know if you want to add, Dave, to that. But that's that's a really important point because that is non-trivial.
Yeah, that's it's not a quick answer to that, first of all. We have actually quite a bit of experience doing this. Quite a bit of experience evolving existing IT into a DevOps model with objectives of driving operational efficiency, reducing the cycle time and delivery, reducing costs, and we can go through the details of that technique. We also have examples, as the team went through, of driving, accelerating innovation, which is often referred to as high-speed IT, and how you put those teams together. We also have examples in a lot of our SaaS properties where we have put together the whole front-end experience for practitioners to come in and become familiar with our offerings, to be able to demonstrate them, trial them with their data, acquire them, and it fundamentally changes the interaction with some of these complex systems. We did that as a high-speed front-end, hooked into back-end system of records, basically. The fascinating thing that created, initially, a lot of contention between the teams. How in the world could one team be doing many updates a day? This other team is doing updates 3 months, periods. And what happened is the team doing the existing IT, they had to be much better at opening up through APIs, managing the APIs, and then they got themselves down, many of the teams got themselves down to 1 month and even 2 week iterations. And it was fascinating to watch and how quickly the teams transformed around this. But that's a track that actually we're going to start publishing in the method that Angel went through.
That's great, thank you. You had a question? You? Yes, I saw your hand going. Don't want to forget you.
Manager. So I wanted to ask you guys about the opportunities that you see in academia for making these processes available in that context. Another question I'd posed earlier when I was chatting with the team was about looking at this from an embedded perspective and applying these processes not only for moving towards embedded and then IoT, but the first one is around academic opportunities for students.
That's a really good point. At OSCON, we launched an academic initiative around cloud. I don't know if you recall. I think you were there. Yeah. You saw me then at OSCON. You remember? Yeah. So there we talked the initiative we have about with 200 or so universities, and in fact this method is part of Bluemix, the method, how you do it, the DevOps is all part of those initiatives. We are very intently trying to get, just like we did in the days of Java and early in the web, right? Trying to get and help universities leverage open source code and leverage the tools and best practices to create essentially a talent pool, a talent pool that all of us can suck into our environments, right? And by the way, it's not just all peace, love, and happiness. There's reasons for doing that. There's good reasons for you all because you have folks you can hire. There's good reasons for us. Our technology is built on these open source technologies. So if there's a huge talent pool, there's clearly a pool for our products, our portfolio, and what we're doing, right? So there's a synergy here. So that is kind of how we are going, let's say, going to market with universities is through that academic initiative that we announced, and everything we do here will flow in through Bluemix. So that answers the academic question. I think, I think that there is a renaissance occurring in academia around how computer science is taught. There is actually much more focus on method now, in addition to programming. There's a lot of curricula happening at Stanford. I spent a lot of time out there around that, and I think that's starting to spread as well. So hopefully this will kind of continue. Right? I mean, we need that as an industry, right? I mean, it's just obvious. Do you have a second part?
Second, but separate question, which is around embedded software applying DevOps, these processes in those contexts, which have particular permutations, and also later basis for doing IoT and systems where you have a whole other business that's focused on that, and then leveraging Watson for cognitive computing, potentially applying. I mean, I have these ideas. I'm just wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah.
You guys think.
Yeah. So I think I'll try to split that into two pieces. The first piece is that what's really amazing about where we're headed and with essentially application composition is the notion around APIs, API management, and how the world is becoming more of a composition of function. You look at our platform, the partnerships we have with Twitter or Apple or the Weather Channel or all of these things. We have created a palette of colors where folks can quickly create applications from very rich data sources, very rich application sources. And the type of innovation that's happening is just surreal, right? So when you have an environment like that, you will always be surprised. You'll always be surprised by what the user wants, holding it like a video game controller, that surprised me, and what you could potentially build because of the fact that it is now becoming so easy. And there's actually standardization occurring, things like Swagger, right, and all the stuff that's happening there around APIs that will allow these things to connect and match more accordingly. Right? So I think it's going to have a big impact on how applications are built, and it will also hopefully empower, I think, kind of very well-grounded, what people would consider IoT applications. You know, to me, and to a lot of us, mobile is an example of an IoT device, right? It's just one and the same. So you're going to need these practices to manage that, right? Especially when you're running at the speeds that you expect to do data processing and streams at, right? You're going to have to be able to do that. So very good. Well, look, thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for coming, and we'll be around. Take care.